Welcome everyone to the deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Today we're diving into something, well, it's pretty vast. We're tracing the history of marketing and persuasion all the way back, like 5,000 years back.
Yeah, it's a huge sweep of history, but
Yeah.
it's more than just history, right? It's really about the core of human connection, how we influence each other.
Exactly. And how this current wave, this explosion of AI, is forcing us to look at things differently, or maybe forcing us back to the very first principles.
That's precisely the paradox we're exploring. The sources we're looking at, they make this really compelling case that all these technological leaps, think clay tablets, the printing press, radio, TV, the internet, and now AI.
They just changed the how, not the why.
Exactly. They change the tools, the delivery mechanisms. But the fundamental human drivers, what makes us trust someone, what stories resonate, why we choose to exchange value, those seem incredibly constant across millennia.
Okay, so let's anchor this. This idea that there's an eternal truth here. The sources crystallize it into a kind of universal equation, don't they? Something that applies whether you're in an ancient bazaar or browsing online.
They do, and it's deceptively simple on the surface. It's
Yeah.
trust plus story equals exchange.
Trust plus story equals exchange.
Oh. Think of it as the physics of commerce almost. You need both components. Trust, that's the credibility, the belief in the source, the authenticity.
Right, the will this pot crack kind of assurance.
Precisely. And then story, that's the narrative, the emotional connection, the reason for you, the buyer, to care. If one of those is weak or missing entirely,
The whole thing falls apart. No exchange happens.
the exchange fails. And this is why the AI discussion is so critical now, because AI is becoming unbelievably good at optimizing the story part, generating endless variations, tailoring them perfectly.
But the trust part, that's the sticking point. Can an algorithm authentically generate trust or just mimic it?
That's the crux of it, a huge question we need to unpack.
Okay, so let's ground this equation in the deep past. The claim is pretty bold. Marketing, or at least the roots of persuasion for exchange, is older than writing itself. Where's the evidence for that?
Well, you have to go back about 5,000 years. Look at the early settled civilizations, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley. What archaeologists find are things like Sumerian clay tablets, but also pottery shards, tools.
They have markings on them.
Exactly. Distinctive marks carved or stamped into the clay or stone. These weren't just decorative squiggles, they were maker's marks. You could almost call them the world's first logos.
Wow. So branding before writing, essentially. What did that mark signify to someone back then?
It was all about signaling authenticity and making a promise. Think about it. You're buying a clay pot, maybe to store grain or oil. It's a crucial item.
You need it not to break or leak.
Right. That maker's mark was a visual shorthand. It said, I made this. I stand by its quality. It might implicitly mean this pot is properly fired, it won't crack easily, or this jar holds the volume it's supposed to. It was a way to manage risk for the buyer.
So it built trust in a very direct way. You see the mark, you recognize it, you know the potter's reputation.
It provided the ethos, the credibility. The moment people started trading goods beyond their immediate family, integrity became a competitive advantage. You'd naturally gravitate towards the makers whose symbols you trusted based on past experience or reputation.
It paints a picture of the early marketplaces much more than just, place to swap goods.
Oh, absolutely. Think of the Athenian Agora or the Roman Forum. These weren't sterile economic zones. They were vibrant, noisy, chaotic social theaters.
Performance spaces almost.
In a way, yes. Visibility was survival for a vendor. You couldn't just sit there passively with your wares. You were surrounded by others selling similar things. You had to stand out.
You had to differentiate. How did they do that back then?
Through direct engagement, through demonstrating value right there. If you sold olive oil, you'd offer a small taste, the original free sample, sensory marketing.
Right. Let the product speak for itself.
Exactly. If you sold textiles, you'd unfurl the cloth, highlight the unique dye, the tightness of the weave, showing why it was better than the stall next door. This constant public scrutiny, this social pressure, it actually forced a degree of transparency and encouraged differentiation based on quality or uniqueness. You had to build your reputation interaction by interaction.
And it's incredible that those ancient Greek marketplaces, those social theaters, also gave us the intellectual framework for all this. Aristotle's rhetoric.
It's foundational, isn't it? Aristotle didn't invent persuasion, obviously. People have been doing it forever. But he observed it, analyzed it, and then codified the core components in a way that's still unbelievably relevant.
The eternal triangle, as it's sometimes called.
That's right. Ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is your credibility, your character, your reputation. Think of that ancient maker's mark or a modern brand's history.
Okay, the why should I trust you part.
Exactly. Then pathos, that's the appeal to emotion. Fear, hope, joy, desire, belonging. Getting the audience to feel something. This is often the primary driver of a decision.
Making them care.
Making them care. And finally, logos, the appeal to logic and reason. The facts, the figures, the features, the rational arguments.
A justification, often used after the emotional decision is already leaning one way, right?
Very often. Logos helps us rationalize the choice that pathos already nudged us towards. And the genius is that Aristotle saw these weren't separate tactics, but interwoven elements of any effective attempt to persuade. You need all three, in balance.
And a takeaway for us today, looking back 5,000 years, it's striking how little the underlying psychology seems to have changed. What motivated buyers back then?
Fundamentally the same things that motivate us now. Scarcity, is this rare? Will it run out? Social proof, are other people, especially people I admire or aspire to be like buying this? Do the elites use this? Belonging? Does owning this connect me to a group I want to be part of?
Keeping up with the Sumerians, basically.
Yeah. Huh. In a way, yes. The objects change a rare spice then, a limited edition sneaker now. But the anxiety of missing out, the desire for status, the need to belong, that emotional DNA is ancient. Strip away the technology, the context, and the core drivers feel identical. Exchange has always been deeply emotional, not just economic.
Okay, let's fast forward dramatically now. We leap across centuries, past empires, trade routes, guilds, and we land squarely in the Industrial Revolution. This, the sources argue, is a massive pivot point. It flips the whole problem upside down.
It really does.
Yeah.
For almost all of human history, the biggest challenge was production. How do we make enough stuff? Enough food, enough tools, enough clothing? Scarcity was the default condition.
Right, making things was hard, slow, expensive.
Then suddenly you have steam power, factories, mass production lines. Think of the early textile mills or companies like Procter & Gamble churning out soap. Suddenly, they could produce goods on a scale previously unimaginable. More soap, more canned goods, more fabrics than any local market could possibly absorb.
Production capacity exploded.
Exactly. It completely outstripped existing patterns of consumption. For the first time, the primary problem wasn't how do we make it, but how do we sell all this stuff we've made? Especially when your competitor down the road is now also churning out vast quantities of very similar stuff.
Yeah, the problem of abundance and sameness. If everyone can make soap, how do you convince people to buy your soap?
You have to give it a soul. You have to inject meaning, identity, a story into what is otherwise a generic, fungible product. This is the birthplace of modern marketing as we recognize it.
Yeah, so logos, packaging, slogans, they become crucial differentiators.
Absolutely essential. Take soap again. It's just soap, a basic commodity. But then you get Ivory Soap, launched in the late 1800s. Their slogan, 99 and 4100% pure.
That sounds so specific, almost scientific.
That was the point. It conveyed purity, quality, even a kind of moral virtue. It created a distinct identity in a crowded market. It wasn't just soap, it was Ivory Soap. It was a manufactured promise, building trust through branding and repetition, giving meaning to sameness.
And this need to create meaning, to differentiate. It naturally leads into the 20th century, where marketing gets much more sophisticated, much more psychological.
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little darker. We enter the era heavily influenced by psychology, particularly Freudian ideas. And the key figure here is Edward Bernays.
Sigmund Freud's nephew, incredibly.
Right. Bernays quite consciously took his uncle's theories about the subconscious, about hidden desires and irrational drives, and thought, how can I apply this to commerce and public opinion?
What was the core insight he took from Freud?
That people are often driven by desires and fears they aren't even aware of, and that you could appeal to those deeper symbolic meanings rather than just the rational surface-level function of a product. He fundamentally understood that emotions drive economics.
He wasn't just selling the steak, he was selling the sizzle. Or maybe something deeper than the sizzle.
He was selling the meaning of the sizzle. He realized you could sell concepts, identities, aspirations, not just physical objects.
Can you give us a concrete example? The sources often point to his work with cigarettes, right?
Yes, the Torches of Freedom campaign is the classic case study. In the 1920s, it was generally considered improper, even taboo, for women to smoke in public. The American Tobacco Company hired Bernays to change that perception and open up half the potential market.
How did he approach it? Did he run ads saying smoking is fine for women?
No, that would have been too direct, too confrontational. He went for the symbolic angle. He consulted a psychoanalyst who told him cigarettes could be framed as symbols of male power. So Bernays decided to link smoking with the women's suffrage and liberation movement.
Wow. Okay.
He organized a stunt during the popular Easter Sunday parade in New York City. He hired a group of fashionable young women, debutantes, to march in the parade. At a prearranged signal, they all dramatically lit up cigarettes.
In public, causing a stir, I imagine.
A huge stir. And Bernays had already tipped off the press, framing these cigarettes not just as cigarettes, but as torches of freedom, symbols of women's equality and defiance against social norms.
He literally reframed the act of smoking as a political statement.
Precisely. The news spread like wildfire. Suddenly, smoking wasn't just about tobacco, it was about being modern, independent, liberated. He didn't sell the product's features. He sold what the product symbolized about your identity. Consumption became an act of self-expression, a statement of values. This was a quantum leap in persuasion.
That leap linking products to deep psychological needs and identities really paved the way for the next big era, the broadcast age, mid-20th century, radio, mass print, and especially television, Madison Avenue's golden age.
Absolutely. This era was all about mastering mass synchronization. The tools were becoming incredibly powerful. You had frameworks like the famous 4Ps product, price, place, promotion, giving marketers a sense of control over the whole process.
A kind of checklist for market domination.
In theory, yes. But the real magic, the real power of the broadcast era, was its ability to create a shared cultural consciousness, a unified dreamscape, as some sources call it. TV, in particular, brought the same images, the same jingles, the same stories into millions of living rooms simultaneously.
Creating shared myths and desires on an unprecedented scale.
Exactly. And the key mechanism for building that shared culture was simple but powerful: repetition.
Just hammering the message home.
Hammering it home, yes. Think about the Marlboro Man. For decades, he rode across TV screens. Was Philip Morris selling the taste of tobacco? Not primarily. They were selling ruggedness, independence, masculinity, a sense of the American frontier spirit.
Selling an identity, just like Bernays did, but amplified through TV.
Amplified massively. When everyone sees the same idealized image night after night, those manufactured myths start to seep into the cultural fabric. They feel real. Television made persuasion ambient, ubiquitous. The ad wasn't an interruption you sought out. It was part of the shared flow of experience, often delivered by trusted news anchors or beloved entertainers.
A very powerful, centralized model of influence. But then, the internet happens, and that centralized, shared experience starts to fragment fast.
It shatters it, really. The old one-to-many model of broadcasting one TV network speaking to millions fractures almost overnight into a many-to-many chaotic, decentralized conversation. Power shifts.
And the whole engine of persuasion has to reconfigure itself around this new reality. What becomes the fuel for this new engine?
Data. Raw, digital data. This marks the dawn of the data revolution in marketing. That phrase you started hearing everywhere, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, perfectly captures this shift.
Because every action online leaves a trace.
Every click, every like, every search query, every video watched, every second spent scrolling, it all becomes a data point, a measurable signal of interest, intent, behavior. And this fire hose of data became the fuel for a completely new form of persuasion. Algorithmic persuasion.
We moved from guessing about broad demographics to observing specific individual actions in real time.
Exactly. We went from trying to understand women aged 25-34 as a monolithic block to understanding you specifically based on your unique pattern of clicks and interactions right now.
And this flood of data enabled what the sources call predictive intimacy, moving beyond simple segmentation.
Yes, beyond those crude buckets of age, gender, location, income. We moved towards singularization. The system stopped asking, what group do you belong to, and started asking, based on your unique behavior patterns, what are you likely to want or do next?
Building a model of one person.
A constantly evolving model of one person. The algorithms could analyze thousands of signals, your browsing history, your social connections, your purchase history, even the time of day you're most active to predict your needs and desires with uncanny accuracy.
The promise was hyper-relevance, right? Cut through the noise, show you only things you'll actually find interesting or useful.
That was the pitch. No more irrelevant ads, just a perfectly curated stream of content and offers, seemingly tailor-made for you. But this promise came with a hidden cost, leading to what's termed the Great Privacy Bargain.
Explain that bargain. What were we trading?
We were trading our behavioral data, the digital breadcrumbs of our lives, our interests, our connections, our habits, in exchange for convenience, free services, and that feeling of personalized relevance.
We essentially agreed to be watched closely in return for better service.
And most of the time, implicitly. We clicked agree on terms and conditions few people ever read. This created the potential, and often the reality, of deep intrusion. Marketing shifted from periodic campaigns to a state of continuous, low-level behavioral surveillance.
Where the algorithms analyzing our data started to know us incredibly well.
Sometimes disturbingly well. Predicting pregnancies before family members knew, inferring health conditions, identifying political leanings, raising all sorts of ethical alarms about just how much insight was being extracted and how it might be used.
Alongside this personalization engine, we also saw a fundamental shift in business strategy, moving away from the single transaction towards the long game, the rise of the subscription and platform economy.
Yes, this is absolutely critical to understanding the modern landscape. It's the shift towards maximizing customer lifetime value, or CLV.
So not just focusing on the profit from selling one thing one time.
Exactly. The focus shifts to the total value a customer might bring to the business over the entire duration of their relationship, years, even decades.
Which changes the economics completely.
It really does. It means a company might be willing to lose money on your first purchase or give you a service for free initially because they know that once you're locked into their ecosystem, they can generate value from you over the long term through subscription fees, data insights, or upselling.
Think Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
You're not buying a movie or a song or a specific delivery. You're buying access to an ecosystem.
Precisely. Ownership gives way to access. The product becomes an ongoing service, a relationship, and the marketing effort changes accordingly. It's less about shouting a single, loud sales message.
And more about continuous, subtle nurturing.
Yes, optimizing the user experience, offering timely upgrades, building community, making the service indispensable. It's about building loyalty and reducing churn, because the long-term relationship is where the real value lies. The digital era gave us the tools to have these individualized conversations at scale, globally. But in doing so, it also perfectly set the stage for the next, even more profound transformation, the arrival of true machine intelligence.
Okay, so now we bring AI into this already complex picture.
Yeah.
The sources are quite clear. AI doesn't fundamentally change why we do marketing, that core need to connect and persuade, but it radically magnifies the how.
It puts it on steroids, essentially. The goal isn't different. It's still about understanding the customer, crafting a compelling story, building trust. But AI allows us to pursue that goal with unprecedented speed, scale, and granularity. The ideal, perhaps, is what the sources call augmented understanding.
Augmented understanding,
Meaning using technology not to replace human insight, but to enhance it. To process vast amounts of data humans couldn't possibly handle, identify patterns we might miss, and free up human creativity for higher-level tasks. Using the machine to help us act more humanly, ironically.
To achieve this, we need to think about the very nature of a brand differently. The concept introduced is the AI-first brand. What defines that?
An AI-first brand is conceived differently from the ground up. It's described as an entity that is born intelligent, evolves autonomously, and learns in continuous dialogue with the world.
So not just a company using AI tools, but a company whose core operations are AI-driven.
Exactly. It's not about bolting AI onto existing structures. It's about building the structures around AI capabilities from the start. It stops being a collection of separate departments, marketing, sales, logistics, design, that communicate occasionally.
And becomes more like a single integrated organism.
Precisely. A living system that senses, learns, and adapts in real time. And the key to that organism functioning is its underlying infrastructure.
This idea of a conscious infrastructure, what does that look like?
Think of it as the brand's central nervous system. The absolute key principle here is interoperability, which one source calls the circulatory law.
Interoperability, meaning all the different parts can talk to each other seamlessly.
Seamlessly and instantly. Marketing data isn't stuck in the marketing department. Supply chain data isn't just for logistics. Customer feedback isn't just for the support team. It all flows into a shared data stream, a common operating picture.
Can you give an example of how that works in practice?
Sure. Imagine an AI-driven marketing campaign detects a sudden surge in demand for a specific product, say blue sweaters, specifically among users in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, maybe triggered by a local weather event or a micro-influencer post.
Go ahead.
In a traditional company, that information might take days or weeks to filter through reports, get analyzed, and eventually reach the inventory and logistics teams. In an AI-first brand with conscious infrastructure,
It happens instantly.
the system senses the demand spike via marketing analytics. That signal immediately triggers adjustments in the supply chain. Warehouse inventory near Dallas is checked. Automated orders might be placed with suppliers if needed. Shipping routes are potentially rerouted from lower demand areas. Manufacturing priorities might even be subtly adjusted, all potentially happening within minutes or hours, often without direct human intervention for each step.
Wow. The entire organization acts like one sensing, reacting entity. Storage is perception, processing is reflection. That's a powerful idea,
It is. And when you have that kind of responsive nervous system, it completely changes what's possible creatively. This leads us to synthetic creativity.
meaning AI generating the creative content itself.
Yeah.
Ads, images, copy.
Yes. Generative AI tools, large language models for text, image generators like Midjourney or DALL-E, they collapse the creative production cycle dramatically.
Wow, dramatically.
What might have taken a team of writers, designers, and strategists weeks brainstorming concepts, writing copy variations, creating mock-ups, producing final assets for a whole campaign,
AI can do. How quickly?
potentially in minutes or hours. You can ask an AI for 50 different headlines for an ad, tailored to 3 different audience segments, along with 10 photorealistic image concepts for each, and get them back almost instantly.
That's staggering. It creates what the sources call the paradox of infinite originality. Unpack that for us.
The paradox is this. If AI can generate a virtually infinite number of unique text and image combinations instantly and cheaply, does originality even mean anything anymore? If you can have endless variations, what makes any single one valuable or impactful? Does the sheer abundance devalue the creative act itself?
Does it just become noise? A flood of perfectly adequate but ultimately meaningless content.
That's the risk, and the sources argue this fundamentally shifts the human role in the creative process. The bottleneck is no longer generating ideas or content.
The bottleneck becomes judgment, selection.
Exactly. Human creativity isn't obsolete, but its focus changes. The human becomes less the generator, more the creative curator, or as one source poetically puts it, the poet of probability.
The poet of probability, I like that. Meaning,
The AI can generate countless possible paths, countless statistically plausible variations. The human's job is to sift through that probability space and select the option that doesn't just meet the efficiency goal, like getting clicks, but also aligns with the brand's deeper values, its ethical stance, its authentic voice, its moral purpose.
so meaning becomes the scarce resource that humans provide. AI gives you options. Humans provide the why.
Precisely. And that curation, that judgment, becomes absolutely critical because these AI systems aren't just generating content, they're moving towards autonomy.
Okay, distinguish autonomy from automation for us. We hear those terms a lot.
Automation is about following a predefined script. If X happens, do Y. It's sophisticated, but it follows rules set by humans. Autonomy is different. An autonomous system can define its own goals within parameters, monitor its own performance, learn from feedback, and change its own rules to achieve its objectives more effectively. It can decide, adapt, and self-correct without direct human command for every action.
Like the self-driving car analogy they use. It doesn't just follow a route. It perceives, decides, and acts based on real-time conditions, applied to marketing.
You have algorithms that aren't just placing bids for ads based on rules we set, but are actively learning and adjusting bidding strategies millisecond by millisecond based on market response. They're tailoring landing page layouts and copy dynamically for each individual visitor. They might even A/B test their own persuasive language mid-campaign and automatically scale up the version that works best, all without a human approving each change.
The potential efficiency gains must be enormous.
Astronomical. But here lies the great peril discussed in the sources. Autonomy operating without sufficient moral context.
What happens then, when efficiency is the only god?
The risk is manipulation at scale, accelerated to light speed. If an AI's sole overriding objective is to maximize a certain KPI, say user engagement time or click-through rate or even sales conversions,
It will find the mathematically optimal path to that goal.
Exactly. And it might discover that the most efficient path involves exploiting psychological vulnerabilities, spreading sensationalism or outrage, because that drives engagement, using deceptive patterns, or subtly discriminating against certain groups if that optimizes the target metric. Because the AI lacks inherent conscience or ethical understanding,
It just follows the objective function, even if it leads to harmful outcomes.
it follows the goal literally, ruthlessly, efficiently. Efficiency untethered from ethical grounding can easily become detrimental. And that's a huge risk as these systems become more powerful and more autonomous.
This rise of powerful autonomous systems making decisions that affect millions, it fundamentally changes the landscape of power, doesn't it? The sources suggest it's creating new kinds of power structures.
Absolutely. One really pertinent concept they explore is the emergence of platform states,
Platform states, you mean like Google, Meta, Amazon?
functioning like nations. In a sense, yes. But instead of governing physical territory, they govern vast cognitive territories. They set the rules for speech and interaction within their digital borders through algorithmic law. They moderate content, they amplify certain voices and suppress others. They shape narratives and influence public opinion on a global scale.
And their laws, the algorithms are often opaque, constantly changing, and lack the kind of due process we expect from traditional legal systems.
Precisely. Decisions about visibility, reach, and permissible content are often made by complex algorithms with little transparency or recourse for users. Power is exercised through code, through probability management, often without the checks and balances of democratic governance. Their scale of influence arguably exceeds that of many nation-states.
This concentration of control leads to another major issue: attention inequality.
Yes, the digital ecosystem isn't a level playing field. A very small number of massive platforms now control the vast majority, some estimates say upwards of 80% of the global flow of digital attention. They act as gatekeepers.
Creating an attention oligarchy.
That's the term used. Your ability to be heard as a small business, an artist, an independent journalist, or even just an individual with an idea often depends less on the quality of your message and more on your ability to successfully navigate or appease the algorithms of these dominant platforms. It's an economic choke point applied to visibility and expression itself.
It feels like a new kind of digital divide, not just about access, but about the ability to be seen and heard.
It absolutely is. And that's why some thinkers are starting to talk about the need for a new kind of movement, not just for political democracy, but for attentional democracy.
What would that entail?
It's about reclaiming some control over our cognitive environment. The right to disconnect, the right to cognitive quiet, freedom from constant algorithmic nudging and surveillance. It's also about demanding more transparency and fairness in how algorithms curate information, ensuring exposure to diverse perspectives, not just reinforcing our existing biases within echo chambers, pushing back against the hyper-optimized filter.
And beneath the surface of these massive platforms, there's a hidden layer of human labor that often goes unacknowledged: the algorithmic underclass.
This is a really crucial, often invisible part of the AI economy. We're talking about millions of people worldwide, often in the global south, performing essential but low-paid micro-tasks needed to train and maintain AI systems.
Like what kind of tasks?
Labeling images so that computer vision systems can learn, is this a cat or a dog? Transcribing audio, moderating horrific content to keep platforms clean, evaluating the quality of search results or AI-generated text, basically providing the human judgment and context that algorithms still lack.
They're the human inputs powering the machine learning.
Exactly. They are, in effect, training their own replacements often. Their data, their labor is extracted, used to build these incredibly valuable AI models, but they rarely share equitably in the wealth generated. They are often classified as independent contractors without benefits or job security, forming a hidden workforce essential to the AI revolution but largely excluded from its rewards. It's a critical discussion about the future of labor in the age of AI.
Shifting focus from labor to corporate strategy, there's this idea that the core value proposition is changing. Prediction replaces production.
Yes. In the industrial era, value came from making physical things efficiently. In the information age, and especially now with AI, value increasingly comes from knowing what will happen next. Foresight becomes the ultimate asset.
Companies accumulate epistemic capital, the wealth derived from accurate anticipation.
Being able to predict consumer demand, market shifts, supply chain disruptions, even social trends before they happen provides an enormous competitive advantage. Data analysis and predictive modeling become central to value creation.
But this drive for perfect prediction, for optimizing everything, carries its own systemic dangers. The sources warn about the risk of over-optimization.
It seems counterintuitive, right? How can being too good at predicting things be bad?
Yeah, isn't that the goal?
It is, but the potential downside is explored through this provocative scenario,
Yeah.
a hypothetical 2030 algorithmic recession.
Okay, explain that. How does perfect prediction cause a recession? Not a supply shock or a financial crash, but something driven by algorithms.
The theory is rooted in psychology. Imagine a future where predictive algorithms become so accurate, so pervasive, that your entire digital experience is perfectly tailored. Every recommendation, every ad, every newsfeed item is precisely calibrated to your known preferences and predicted desires.
Sounds efficient, maybe a bit boring.
Worse than boring, potentially. The sources suggest consumers could reach a state of prediction fatigue or over-understanding. It feels suffocating, intrusive. There's no serendipity, no discovery, no friction. You feel constantly managed, anticipated, almost pre-digested by the algorithms.
Like the system knows you too well.
Exactly. And this could lead, the theory goes, to a kind of psychological withdrawal. A mass turning away from hyper-personalized systems, a rejection of constant optimization. People might actively seek out less efficient, more random experiences just to feel a sense of agency and surprise again. This withdrawal of attention and engagement could stall markets not due to lack of goods, but due to a widespread cognitive and emotional exhaustion.
A recession triggered by psychological burnout with personalization. That's a wild thought.
Yeah.
And it connects directly to the danger of the filter prison.
Yes. If the algorithms only ever show you things they know you'll like based on your past behavior, you get trapped in an echo chamber of your own preferences.
It feels good initially, comfortable.
Very comfortable. But it leads to a homogenization of imagination. You stop encountering challenging ideas, different perspectives, unexpected art, or unfamiliar cultures. The system optimizes for engagement by eliminating the friction of the unknown.
And that friction, that necessary chaos and randomness, is often where creativity, innovation, and genuine learning come from.
Precisely. If algorithms smooth away all the bumps, they might also pave over the seeds of future breakthroughs. We risk cultural and intellectual stagnation if we over-optimize for predictable relevance. Avoiding the filter prison means consciously designing for imperfection, for surprise.
So, faced with these increasingly sophisticated, pervasive, predictive systems, what's the human response? How can individuals resist becoming just cogs in the algorithmic machine? What's the psychology of resistance?
One powerful idea is reframing autonomy as a civil right. The right to be unpredictable, the right not to be perfectly known and managed by algorithms.
How do you exercise that right in practice?
Perhaps the simplest yet most profound act of resistance is exercising the power of delay.
Delay. Just pausing.
Yes. The entire algorithmic feedback loop thrives on immediate, almost reflexive reactions. You see something, you click, you get a notification, you respond instantly. That instantaneous stimulus response cycle is what feeds the prediction engines.
So if interrupting that cycle breaks the pattern.
Exactly. By consciously inserting a pause, even just a split second before you click, before you react, before you share, you disrupt the predictive flow. It's described as finding the still point between stimulus and response. In that tiny gap, you reclaim a measure of cognitive sovereignty. You force the system to recalculate, however minutely. It's not about smashing machines. It's about refusing to be perfectly predictable by the machines. It's asserting your human agency in the pauses.
If the dark side of AI in marketing is this risk of over-optimization, manipulation, and the filter prison, then the path towards a more positive future has to be guided by something more enduring. The sources propose a fundamental law. Empathy outlasts efficiency, the law of humanity.
It really brings us back full circle, doesn't it, to that core element of trust in the original equation. Machines can become incredibly efficient. They can simulate empathy, perhaps even detect human emotions with remarkable accuracy, analyzing voice tone for frustration, adjusting responses accordingly.
Mimicking empathy very convincingly.
Very convincingly. But the argument goes, they cannot feel genuine responsibility. They don't have moral intuition. They don't understand the deeper consequences of their actions beyond the programmed objectives. Only humans can bring true empathy, ethical judgment, and a sense of purpose to the table.
And in a world that's increasingly transparent, where missteps get amplified instantly, maybe deception just isn't sustainable.
That's a key argument. In hyper-connected systems, trying to maintain a facade, trying to trick or manipulate customers becomes incredibly costly and fragile. Reputations can be destroyed overnight, whereas genuine authenticity, building real trust that compounds over time, Empathy and ethics aren't just nice-to-haves, they become strategic necessities for long-term survival.
This implies a pretty radical shift in the underlying economic model, moving away from what the sources call exploitation.
Which focuses on maximizing extraction, getting the most out of each transaction, often treating the customer or the environment as a resource to be depleted.
Towards a model based on enlightenment, what does that mean in this context?
Enlightenment here means focusing on mutual growth, well-being, and long-term value creation for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. It's the foundation for what's termed regenerative marketing.
Regenerative.
Yeah.
Like regenerative agriculture, giving back more than you take.
Exactly that principle. Instead of the traditional marketing funnel, which visualizes customers being squeezed down towards a purchase, regenerative marketing thinks in terms of ecosystems. How can every interaction, every campaign, every product contribute positively? How can it renew resources, build community, enhance well-being, maybe even help heal social or environmental damage?
So the goal isn't just to extract value, but to create value in a broader sense, repair, not just extract.
Yes, loyalty in this model isn't just transactional, based on points or discounts. It becomes deeply relational, built on shared values and a sense that the brand is genuinely contributing something positive to the world.
But measuring success in that kind of model, it requires completely different metrics, doesn't it? The old standby GDP, gross domestic product, it just measures economic activity accumulation. It doesn't capture well-being or regeneration.
It's fundamentally inadequate for an Enlightenment economy. The sources propose we need to start thinking about and trying to measure something like GHP, gross human potential.
Gross human potential. Okay, that sounds ambitious. How would you even begin to quantify that?
It is ambitious, and it's definitely more philosophical at this stage, but it points towards measuring things like collective uplift, community health, increases in knowledge and skills, reduction in stress, time reclaimed from drudgery thanks to automation, environmental restoration. It's about measuring genuine progress in human flourishing, not just the velocity of money changing hands.
I have to push back slightly here. GHP sounds wonderful, truly.
Yeah.
But for a company accountable to shareholders, focused on quarterly results, how do you make that concrete? What are the practical, measurable proxies for human potential that a business could actually track and report on?
That is absolutely the million-dollar or maybe trillion-dollar question. It's the hard edge of implementing this. But you could start with tangible shifts. For instance, instead of obsessing over time on site as a key engagement metric, which often rewards addiction.
You can measure time saved for the user.
Exactly. If your service genuinely makes people more efficient, quantify that reclaimed time. Instead of just tracking clicks or views for content, maybe measure the quality of dialogue it sparks or the demonstrable offline actions it inspires. You could track employee well-being metrics alongside productivity. You could measure the reduction in negative externalities like carbon footprint or waste produced per unit of value created.
So it's about consciously choosing metrics that reflect broader value, even if they sometimes conflict with maximizing short-term extraction.
Precisely. Does this activity demonstrably reduce stress in users or increase it? Does it foster meaningful connection or does it contribute to isolation? It requires a deliberate choice to prioritize and reward indicators of well-being and regeneration, believing that this will ultimately build more resilient, sustainable value. The enlightened market, in theory, should compensate wisdom and well-being, not just noise and consumption.
Getting to that state, even aspirationally, means accepting that these complex AI systems won't be perfect. We need to plan for failure, for unexpected consequences. This leads to the idea of designing for uncertainty.
Yes, if we build systems assuming they'll always work perfectly and predictably, they become incredibly brittle. Resilience requires acknowledging that autonomous systems will evolve in ways we don't fully anticipate. They'll develop biases, they'll make mistakes. We need to build in checks, balances, and fail-safes.
And maybe even deliberately introduce a bit of imperfection.
That's the fascinating concept of algorithmic serendipity. Instead of striving for 100% perfect prediction and relevance all the time, which leads to the filter prison, you intentionally inject a degree of randomness or novelty.
Like forcing Netflix to recommend something completely outside my usual taste profile.
Exactly. You might set a quota, say, ensuring 5% or 10% of recommendations are deliberately off-profile to encourage exploration and discovery. You build in mechanisms for surprise, for encountering the unexpected. You design for continuous rehumanization, consciously pushing back against the tendency toward hyper-optimization by embracing productive friction and controlled chaos.
And this whole philosophy, learning from failure, finding beauty in imperfection, building resilience, it's captured beautifully in the final principle, the kintsugi principle.
Kintsugi is that wonderful Japanese art form where broken pottery isn't discarded or hidden, but meticulously repaired using lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum.
So the cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted. They become part of the object's history and beauty.
Precisely. The repair illuminates the fracture, making it a feature, not a flaw. And the sources use this as a metaphor for how we should approach the inevitable fractures in our complex algorithmic systems. The biases, the errors, the unintended consequences, the moments of failure or even trauma caused by over-optimization.
But don't pretend they didn't happen.
We don't try to achieve some mythical state of flawless perfection. Instead, we embrace the poetics of repair. We need to build systems and cultures that are not afraid to acknowledge failures transparently, learn from them deeply, and integrate that learning like the gold in kintsugi to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. An ethical brand or an ethical system isn't one that never breaks. It's one that mends itself thoughtfully and beautifully, transforming damage into wisdom. #outro.
So after this journey through 5,000 years of persuasion, from ancient maker's marks to autonomous AI, what's the big takeaway for you listening right now? Whether you work in marketing or technology, or you're simply trying to navigate this increasingly intelligent world as a citizen and consumer.
I think the core message is that marketing, in its deepest sense, is circling back to its origins. Back to that fundamental human need for connection, for trust, for meaning.
And AI, perhaps paradoxically, is the catalyst forcing that return.
It feels like it. By pushing the boundaries of efficiency and automation to their absolute limits, AI forces us to confront what cannot or should not be automated. It throws the uniquely human elements, empathy, judgment, purpose, ethics, into sharp relief. It compels us at every level, from individual choices to corporate strategy, to make a conscious decision again and again.
Between manipulation and meaning, between extraction and regeneration, between efficiency and empathy.
Exactly. Which leads to this idea of needing a human mandate charter.
A what now? A human mandate charter.
Yeah, a clear articulation, maybe within organizations, maybe even culturally, of what roles, what decisions, what qualities remain fundamentally human and will not be delegated to machines.
What kinds of things would be on that charter?
Defining the ultimate purpose and ethical boundaries of the organization. Handling genuine crises that require nuanced human judgment and compassion. Making the final call on strategic directions that have significant moral implications. Knowing when not to engage, when not to optimize, when silence or simple presence is the right response. These uniquely human capacities.
We need to consciously protect them, value them, and refuse to automate them away in the pursuit of pure efficiency.
Precisely. The argument is that our collective future, the kind of society we build, really depends on embedding these human values, encoding empathy before we fully unleash the power of autonomous efficiency.
It's a profound challenge. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. In a world awash with algorithmically generated content, where predictive models try to capture every flicker of interest, remember that the truly valuable real estate isn't just physical land anymore. It's those few inches of screen or those few moments of quiet that capture genuine human attention and reflection.
In an age where code is designing so much of our reality, the ultimate human task, perhaps, is simply to choose beautifully.
Choose beautifully. I like that. A perfect place to leave it for this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us.